Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them.
I've noticed a trend recently of a lot of people who are starting campaigns, but they're new dungeon masters. They've run a few little missions with players, and they're ready to start what they think is going to be a long-term campaign, and that's great. Amen. More power to you. I've been playing for 45 years, over 45 years, and I've been running them for over 40 years, since 79, 80, something like that. And so, 41 years. Anyway, I try not to tell people how to run their game, but this is general advice, okay, from an old hack gamer. Whenever a new game is starting, players want to make a character with usable skills and a reasonable chance of survival. And this is a good thing. It's a great thing. It means the players are interested in the game. This lets the players have fun, and that's the point, to have fun, right? Okay. If the game is just a one-shot mission, any background for your character, for any character, is going to work. Any kind of a mission starter will suffice. It's just a one-shot thing, right? It's basically the backstory is really not that important. But if the game is going to be a serious long-term campaign, multiple scenarios put together with an ultimate end goal, I recommend starting the players with just a basic background. Basically, in this, less is better, because they're also, I like to start them with a significant disadvantage, because it gives them something to overcome before the main campaign starts. And the reason I do this is it lets the players discover their characters and create the backstory instead of just writing it out. It gives them an investment in the character before the main campaign starts. And I've given some examples here. Player characters can start out with silver instead of gold, which means the economy in the country is really bad. Player characters start out in an oppressive nation where it's on the silver standard instead of the gold standard as before, where most major weapons are illegal, such as, only maybe allow them, spears, slings, knives, clubs, staffs, so basic stuff only. No bows, no forged weapons, that kind of thing. And this will give them a reason maybe they want to overthrow the tyrant. It's a side thing that the players themselves want to do, besides the campaign that you have planned. Okay. Now, when I say starts on the silver standard, in the player's handbook, they have the dice that characters roll to find out how much money they start out with, and it's generally expressed in gold pieces. With this, start it, instead of make it gold, make it silver. That means they can buy less. They have less to start with. I noticed in 3.5, and that's the latest edition I've played. I'm not a huge fan, but I run Advanced Dungeons and Dragons primarily. But I've noticed in 3.5 they have a lot of really advanced stuff you can get, and you have a lot of money to buy equipment with, and it's just it gives your character a significant advantage right at the beginning. In Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you start out really weak and you work your way up to becoming powerful, and it gives your character more of a backstory. It gives you an investment in the building of the character, and it gives a better flavor to the game. That's my opinion. The third possibility that I came up with, player characters start out at 1d4 level. Instead of first level, they can start out, roll a d4, so it's between first and fourth level. But they start out as slaves. So for whatever reason, they're slaves. They've been either born into slavery and taught skills, or they were captured and sold into slavery, that kind of thing, because it's very prevalent in primitive societies. And this will give the player characters the impetus to want to end slavery. You see what I'm saying? One of the best campaigns I ever ran, I had a character playing in the game. When my friend Bobby was running it, he started out as a slave. His entire thing was he escaped slavery, and then he ended slavery in that area, and he did such a good job. Okay, and this was aside from the campaign. Check out the story, The Puppet Master. Same character. Okay, he ended up running multiple kingdoms. Great character, great player, but you know. And the fourth one, the player characters start out in an area ravaged by a natural disaster, a tornado, flood, whatever, hurricane hit, something, and they've got to find supplies and survive. They start out with almost nothing, and they have to, you know, find supplies to survive. And if you, this isn't by any means all you can do. This isn't the end all and be all of disadvantages, but you can come up with some of your own ideas. And using these measures at the start of a long campaign will ensure that the players will create a backstory during the game that will make their characters uniquely theirs. Any idiot can write out a backstory for a character. You know, when they create the backstory during the course of the campaign, it's more personal. It's more real. You see what I'm saying? Something they can sink their teeth into, as it were. I've been playing D&D since the 1970s. I've been running advanced Dungeons and Dragons games since 1979. One of the trickiest parts of a new campaign is the beginning adventures. And yes, that's adventures plural. Gone are the days of, okay, you all meet at a tavern and get ready to go on this adventure. Nobody does that anymore. When I first started, that's how they, as a matter of fact, the very first game that I ever played, when I was playing the game, that's how the guy started it out. But being a dungeon master was new back then, so they were still working the bugs out of both ends. Gaming, playing and running. So, and those days are long, long gone. If you start out a campaign with, well, you all meet at a tavern and decide to adventure together, yeah, you're robbing your players of a lot of adventure and a lot of fun. You see, each of your players has created a unique and individual character to run in your game. Each player character has its own background and origin. So, if you have 6 players, you have 6 different stories and backgrounds that you have to intertwine into the thread of your story, your campaign. A character raised in a wealthy or noble setting will have radically different ideas, perceptions, and manners than, say, a character raised on a ranch or on a farm. Each player character has to be run separately at first in order to reach a point where they all meet. The beginning adventures have to take each individual character from their player-created starting points to a time and place where the group comes together with common cause to reach a singular goal. This can be exceedingly difficult. Plan for your player characters to leave where they are and converge at a specific place and time where they can discover that common cause. Your campaign has a beginning point. It would behoove you to make that point the convergence point where all of your beginning adventures take the individual player characters. So they start where they started at, where their backstories, they start there, and these beginning adventures end at the beginning of your campaign. And all the player characters have to get to that convergent point, the beginning of your campaign. Each player character will have to have an individual story appropriate to the character and its background, which reaches that convergence point. It will be necessary to run each player separately from the others, possibly letting them earn enough experience to rise a level or two for these individual adventures. One of the cardinal sins of a dungeon master is to not take a PC backstory into account when creating these individual beginning adventures, and not taking that backstory into account when creating the main campaign. In other words, think of your campaign as a strong metal alloy. You mix in specific ingredients
Blend them properly in order to make a strong steel to forge a sword. Each player character backstory must be added and blended properly in order to make a good campaign. So, the player characters each start with a different story. You weave these together into the fabric of your campaign. Just like you mix different metals together to form a strong alloy to make your sword. Same thing. Good individual beginning adventures are a key aspect in creating a good campaign. The players have to believe that they made the choices which led them all to meeting up. Another of the cardinal sins is to force a player character to go a certain way. Now, of course, the player characters have to reach the beginning point of your campaign. So a certain amount of coercion and prodding is necessary. But they can't know they're being coerced or prodded to go in a certain direction or to take certain actions. It has to seem like it's all their choice. This takes planning and practice. It is not easy. I've been running games for 43 years and I still find it one of the most challenging aspects of the game. Consider finding something in the player character backstory or origin that will give the player motivation to participate in the game. One of the worst things as a dungeon master is for a player to say, my character has no reason or desire to do this or to be here or whatever. My character has no reason to do this. Why am I here? Motivation is key. There are so many variations on the different classes of characters that specific ideas on beginning adventures would be moot. However, general themes on ideas might help you come up with some of your own. For example, a villain could rob a player character's family of gold or goods. He stole from us, you got to go get it back. That kind of thing. A wealthy noble or player character like a cavalier, a wealthy or noble player character like a cavalier might be put on a quest or be dishonored somehow, and he's got to get that honor back. He's honor bound to go do this. That kind of thing. An exceedingly poor family could be in debt to someone, and the player character must find gold to pay the debt. A lord or noble could seize the land of a player character's family, prompting the player character to take revenge. The player character could be taken by force as a slave, for example, prompting escape and retribution. These are just a few ideas, and I realize that these ideas are general and vague, but that was on purpose. You have to come up with different ideas. The same old thing gets old quickly. Oh look, we're starting out at the end of a war again. I get that all the time, because when there's a war, player characters are forced to work together. So at the end of the war, groups of people are mustered out together. Well, we don't need you anymore. Here's your pay. Get out. That's what happens at the end of wars, and it's a common way for dungeon masters to get player characters together. And in the past, when I've been asked to run a game on the spur of the moment, that has been one of my go-to things, and I got to be honest, I fell into the rut of doing it a lot. So, that gets old pretty quick. I'm just saying. And I know this video is kind of all over the place, but I really hope it helps to make your campaign really memorable for your players. Again, remember the litmus test for your game is if the players are having fun. If the players are having fun, your game is successful. You have succeeded as a dungeon master. It's that simple. One-shot adventure ideas. I had a friend of mine ask me the other day. He called me on the phone. He had a group that they wanted to play D&D, but they didn't want a long campaign because their work schedule prevented them from having a serious long-term campaign. They just wanted a one-shot idea. They wanted just a one-time game. And so he asked me for ideas because he hadn't done it in a while. Now, first off, every dungeon master worth his salt knows that imagination is the key to a fun game. So this guy's not lacking in imagination.
I know that. I've played with him for years. So, you know, he needed ideas is all. The Dungeon Master job is to create and run a game that your players will enjoy. It has to be challenging and exciting and to be fun for the players. That's the point of the game. So this guy asking me for ideas meant he was trying, and that's a good thing. If sometimes you have to ask for ideas, you need other input, and that's good. Secondly, you must know the players, what they like, and the player characters they have created. Now, he has to get into that, and he knows that. I don't have to tell him that, but I'm just putting it in here for the sake of this video. It sucks when a player says, "Why is my character here?" Or, "I'm bored, my character's going to go and find a rich mark to rob," or whatever. Or, my character's going to go to the bar. Just sit there. Why not? Well, there's nothing else to do. You know, that's one thing you never want to do. The adventure must provide something for each player and their characters. You've got to have stuff that they're interested in, and you've got to have stuff that a player character would want to do. Paladins are easy because there's evildoers. Go get them. You know, that kind of thing. Anyway, that's the old joke. Smite that evil. Some characters' alignments or types may limit your adventure ideas. For example, a lawful good character will prevent heist-type adventures without serious extenuating circumstances. They may try to go rob an evil temple or something. That would be okay, but there's got to be some significant extenuating circumstances. Evil characters will not want to do good deeds without serious extenuating circumstances. I ran a campaign for 14 years. I omitted evils or chaotic neutrals from the game because it's very difficult in a campaign setting to get evil people to want to save the world or to do good deeds. It works on a short-term basis, but for a long-term campaign, man, that's tough. The evil character has to want to change. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That's my experience. So, on to these general adventure ideas. This is basically what I told him. If you just want a one-time short little campaign, a short little game, but not a campaign, being hired to perform a function with the authorities in the area, and or by the authorities, in which they cannot undertake for some reason. For example, the army's occupied elsewhere. They don't have the specialists needed to go do this or that, that kind of thing. There's 100 reasons. I'm just giving you a few examples here. But for whatever reason, the authorities can't deal with blah, so they hire the group to do it. And that happens in modern day too. They're hiring mercenaries all over the world. Just saying. For example, they're hired to clean out old ruins for the authorities to use, the nobles or the army or whatever. They want to seek out and eliminate a cult. The cult's causing them problems, and they don't want to commit the army to do it for whatever reason. Maybe the army's occupied elsewhere, that kind of thing. The authorities need to negotiate with a thieves guild, and maybe the group is better suited to negotiating with the thieves guild than the rulers are. They need to discover members of a secret society. Now this is a good one. I found this one to be very useful. When you have authorities and a secret society is causing problems, they don't know who all is in the secret society. Chances are some of the nobles, some of the rulers are in the secret society. Some of maybe even high-ranking military people. So you can't have the military or the nobles or whoever investigating a secret society that they may be part of. You see what I'm saying? You don't know who to trust, so you turn to people that have nothing to do with it. You see what I'm saying? So, discovering members of a secret society or investigating the secret society, yeah, that's a worthwhile thing there. Defending a village from outlaws. Maybe outlaws are after a village and the nobles won't defend them properly for whatever reason, and the village hires the group. Kind of like the Magnificent Seven. The Seven Samurai. Great movies. They're hired to scout out an area and find blah to try and deliver a message and or negotiate with them. Maybe there's a bandit king that they need to negotiate with, or maybe there's a war and they need to open peace negotiations, but they can't send the army to do it because the army, they'll think it's another incursion, that kind of thing. They need to negotiate with the other side, that kind of thing. Maybe they need to locate and eliminate a wizard who's making undead for whatever reason. Clerics work pretty good in that respect too. Sometimes evil spellcasters do bad things because they can. Hell, they may have a master plan at work. You never know. I like that one because even if you defeat them, maybe the plan is still ongoing. If something changes in the future and they want to run these same characters in a campaign, this is a good starting point for that. Maybe they need to locate and eliminate an evil cleric who's extorting money from a village, that kind of thing. The possibilities are endless. This is only a sampling, but any of these will serve as an introductory adventure for a campaign or as a one-shot adventure. So, again, imagination is the key, and the possibilities are literally endless. When you're creating, as a dungeon master, when you're creating a campaign, there are certain things that you have to have in order to make the campaign function. And the basics of what I'm going to tell you are very, very basic. But the variety is infinite. You can do this however you want. I'm trying to give you the basics of what you have to have in order for the campaign to work. Otherwise, your player characters are just going to be running around doing whatever all the time. And that may work a few times here and there. From time to time, it's nice to let them cut loose. But for the most part, if you want them to stay on track, you have to have a campaign that keeps them on track. Or at least that interests them enough to want to stay on track. And I'm not trying to tell you how to run your game. You can ignore my advice. I'm just an old hack wargamer that has been doing this a long time. Seen and done some shit. Alright. First off, you need a story or a plot. A story and a plot. Every campaign has to have a storyline which incorporates a plot. The plot of the big bad guy has to threaten things of interest to the player characters. A grand heist of some foreign facility or institution, for example, will not garner the attention or ire of a local thief, a fighter, or a local cleric because they have no vested interest in that other facility. The plot would have to threaten a local beneficiary or the national well-being in general. Something like a plot to oust the just king or to rob a business that benefits the player characters in some way, that might work. If the king pardoned the thief because of some technicality which he didn't have to do, and employs the fighter for personal security, which would be a great honor with tremendous pay, and goes to the cleric for advice, another great honor, and pays the wizard well for his services, it might urge a sense of loyalty and goodwill with those player characters. Anyone threatening to oust their king unjustly would be worth stopping. You have to give the player characters a vested interest in stopping the bad guy. The second thing you're going to need is a bad guy, a villain. I did a video on the types of villains. Go and check that one out. For purposes of this video, I'm talking about the big bad major villain. He has to have a master plan. Maybe he wants to rule a kingdom. Maybe he wants to become the most magically powerful being in the world. Maybe he wants to resurrect some long-dead ancient deity. Maybe he wants to become the wealthiest person in the land. Whatever. But this villain has to have a master plan. He also has to have the means and the motive and the opportunity to enact his master plan. He can have the greatest plan in the world, but if he doesn't have the means to carry it out, it's not going to work. He has to be motivated to do this. Otherwise, why have a master plan if you're not motivated? And he has to have the opportunity to do it. If he has no chance to get it done, what's the point of a plan? He has to have this. This one isn't as necessary as some of the others, but he has to have a henchman or an army. Even if he has a couple of helpers, that's their henchmen. Check out that video I did on villains. You'll see what I mean. Each and every player character has to have a vested interest in trying to stop the villain. I talked about this earlier with the story, the plot. A player who sees no reason for his character to participate will be bored and may grow resentful. Years ago, I started a small campaign with 5 players. In the second encounter, one of the player characters died. It was a case of serious stupidity on the player's part. There was no way to save their player character. Even if I could, I don't know that I would have. Because the player really acted stupidly. So the player made up a new character, Craig. Problem was that the new player character had a backstory that was antithetical to the storyline, and the new player character simply had no reason to participate. More than that, the new player character had more in common with the villain than the other player characters. It quickly escalated out of control as the new player character began arguing with the others, and ultimately combat broke out within the group. 3 players ended up having to create new player characters. It was a nightmare. Your player character backstories need to mesh with the story in such a way that the player characters will want to stop the villain for whatever reason. You can't control how your players write their backstory. That's why I don't put a lot of stock in a huge backstory. You know, where they were born, who their parents were, the basics. I like to run the characters ahead of time before I get them into the campaign, because that way we've created their backstory, or at least a good portion of it, enough to where they're vested in the campaign. You see what I'm saying? If they write out a backstory that has nothing to do with your campaign, or that's the other thing, you got to let them do their backstories before you figure out your campaign. It's crazy. If you have an existing campaign and a new player wants to join it, that's fine. He has to make a character that's willing to play. That's part of his responsibility. If he makes a character that is antithetical to the group and has more in common with the villain, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Part of the player's responsibility is to, when they're joining a campaign, is to make a character that's useful to the group. Part of being useful to the group is having a vested interest in trying to stop the bad guy, or help the group do whatever they're doing. You see what I'm saying? There have to be maps. The maps can be basic or as detailed as you want, as long as they serve the purpose for illustrating the setting and getting your player characters from point A to point B. Underground and or dungeon maps must be a lot more precise and detailed. Locations, destinations, and landmarks must be logical and must make sense in the story. A villain who's raising an army to conquer the kingdom must have a kingdom to conquer. There must be geographic and political borders, foreign lands to acquire troops from. If he's raising an army inside the kingdom to conquer the kingdom, that's going to be difficult. I did a video on, what was it? Coups and Rebellions, that's what it was. Go watch that one. You'll see what I'm saying. If you're raising an army inside the kingdom to oust the kingdom, to oust the king and take over the kingdom, that's exceedingly difficult. It's easier to go outside the boundaries of the kingdom, raise an army, and then come back. It's a lot easier. A villain searching for a long-lost artifact must have an area to search. That area will contain rivers, mountains, ruins, cities, islands, and whatnot. All this must be included on your map. Now, again, you can make it as detailed as you want, but the map has to serve the function. It has to give the players something to work with. Well, there's mountains to the north. Okay, how far? Oh, that didn't work. You got to give them some scope. You got to give them some scale. The Dungeon Master must outline the master plan in steps which will allow the player characters to possibly intervene. If the villain's plan is to revive a long-dead deity, he will need items and whatnot. One henchman will retrieve this thing, another henchman is going to retrieve that thing, another henchman is going to retrieve this amulet that the guy needs, another henchman is going to retrieve the mystic MacGuffin, which combine with the items and bring the deity back. Each step, the player characters will have the opportunity, or should have the opportunity, to intervene and or investigate to stop the villain. Years ago, I was playing a game, it was Heroes Unlimited, and the guy had a villain that he created who kept robbing banks in the area, and for whatever reason, the player characters knew the banks were being robbed, but they had no idea how it was being done. We were stymied. We had no idea what bank was going to be hit next. We were trying to research and do some investigation. We even went so far as to contact the police. And this guy kept hitting banks, and we had no idea how to stop them. We figured maybe he was invisible or could teleport or whatever. Wasn't the case. He was a guy with a big robot. How you could rob a bank with a big robot and not be noticed, I don't understand. But you see what I'm saying? That was a poorly planned thing because the player characters had no idea how to stop him. And if the player characters, if our characters could see the robot or knew that there was a robot, but nobody reported the robot, maybe it cloaked or something, I don't know, but having the wall ripped out to get to the money, yeah, that's noticeable. It's hard to hide that. This game master, we would show up to the game and he was like, yeah, this bank just got robbed. Okay, what were we'll talk to the witnesses. Nobody saw anything. Okay, well, the banks were robbed in a random order, so it's not like he's going down the checklist. They're not alphabetical or anything like that. All right, well, what do the police have on it? Nothing. What about fingerprints? Nothing. Well, the player characters have to have some kind of idea how to stop, or they have to have the opportunity to try to stop the bad guy. If they try and fail, that's one thing, but they have to have the opportunity to try. You have to give them enough information, enough capability to intervene or investigate, or in order to try to stop the villain. At each step, the player characters have to have the opportunity to intervene and or investigate in order to stop this guy. Otherwise, his master plan is going to go off without a hitch. And that's supposed to be a storytelling thing where the player characters are the heroes. If they fail, then it falls to them to defeat the resurrected deity or whatever the thing is. So, essentially, every step of the way, there has to be minor failures on the part of the henchman, or maybe in the plan, or whatever, so that the players, hey, wait, what's that guy doing? Let's go stop him. Or, hey, they've hit this and this. They got to go after this next. If they're going to do this thing, they're going to go after this next. So we'll go meet them there, and we'll wait and catch them by surprise. Something. It's got to be something like that. Each step of the way, the player characters have to have the opportunity to intervene and or investigate to stop the villain. If they fail, then it falls to them to defeat the big bad guy after his plan is enacted, which will be far more difficult. But that's part of the game. When I first started playing, the term one-shot didn't exist. We made up characters for so-and-so's game, and we played the game. Sometimes it was done in 1 or 2 sessions. Sometimes it took longer. We didn't have names for the types of sessions, the types of games. We didn't have names for them. All we knew was that it was fun and exciting. We judged the game by how well the Dungeon Master ran it. It was all new. The first real campaign I ever played in was my friend Jesse's game. We started out exploring an old tower, some ruins, because our characters were pretty broke.
From that short mission, Jesse expanded his game into an entire world where our party eventually ended up overthrowing an evil tyrant and installing his good cousin as the new king. It was a 2-year campaign, and it was awesome. I loved it. Jesse's an excellent game master. What people call a one-shot today is generally designed for 1 or 2 sessions, usually about 8 to 12 hours in total. This never works out like that. It always takes longer. The last one-shot I played in took over a month, which was about 4 game sessions, and we still didn't finish it. I'm not sure why. We were having fun. It's just the way it goes sometimes. The people want to do something else and they do it. Something happens with the game masters. The timing is wrong. The people can't show up for whatever reason, or maybe the venue is unavailable for whatever reason. Something always happens to interrupt it. But I'm not sure why this happened. Everybody was having fun, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. A campaign is anything longer than a one-shot, evidently. These days, most dungeon masters see a nice module at the store. And everyone rolls up new characters at whatever level the module calls for. It is a valid way to run a game. It's fun for everyone involved. It is, and that's the point of a tabletop role-playing game, to have fun. However, a real old-school campaign has every player roll up a first-level character. Each player runs their character separately until the dungeon master can get them to meet up with at least one other player character. And slowly the group gets together. As the player characters join up, the group is formed. This usually takes multiple game sessions, and by the time the group is formed completely, the player characters are between 2nd and 5th levels. The setting is a world the dungeon master has created from scratch. Check out my Advanced Dungeons & Dragons advice videos and you'll get a feel for how games were run back in the day. Campaigns of this type last for years, sometimes decades. The last real campaign I ran lasted for like 13 or 14 years. The characters started out at first level and in a variety of disparate situations. One was a slave, one was a hunter, one was living in a monastery as a monk, one was in a temple as a cleric. One was in a castle, one was a fisherman, one was a mason, and one was shipwrecked from a foreign land, the Oriental Adventures. Over the course of that 13 years, or 14 years, whatever it was, these player characters ended slavery, acted as couriers and diplomats, ended 3 wars, forged 6 kingdoms into an empire, uniting dwarves, elves, and humans, and then one of them, an unlikely barbarian, became the emperor. Then another, the Hungan, who started out as a slave, took control of that barbarian and several other rulers using his voodoo magic and ran the whole show from the shadows in his mountaintop cave. Yeah. I'd check out my video, The Puppet Master. During the course of this 13-year or 14-year campaign, whatever it was, one player character created an aircraft carrier and a troop transport. Another forged an alliance between Asian and Occidental worlds. Another settled a long-running feud between 2 rich families. One married the daughter of a noble and sired the future king of a coastal trading kingdom. Finally, my good friend Jesse, the quintessential thief, became a criminal kingpin who ran the Thieves Guild and a dozen other underworld organizations. He made Al Capone look like a petty thief. Only his group helped keep the peace, and they fostered trade. Yeah. What I'm getting at, I guess, is that the concept of the different types of games has changed over the years. People these days have shorter attention spans and lack the patience of the gamers back in the day. In high school, we would start gaming on Friday after school, and everyone would go home on Sunday night. We slept when we needed to and ate when we could. I swear it used to drive my mom crazy. During that 14-year campaign, we usually played twice a week. On Tuesdays, we started at 6 p.m. and played until midnight. On Friday nights, we started at 6 and played until Saturday evening around 8 p.m. or so. This was usually every week. People these days have nowhere near that kind of stamina or patience. And to be fair, in today's economy, very few people have that kind of time, honestly. But more importantly, the gamers of today have no idea what a real campaign is. They will never know what it is like to find yourself in a world of magic and monsters, to overcome adversity and then reshape that world into something new and different, to have a hand in the creation of a new world. It's sad that those good old days are gone forever. I'm not sad for me, mind you. I enjoyed them. I was there. I'm sad for these new gamers of today. They have no idea what they missed out on. Yeah, the gamers that I play with now are absolutely wonderful. They're good people. But, my son and I play the game every Sunday, and it's really great. We play 5th edition. But there's something to be said for those old games and how they jump-started the entire tabletop role-playing genre. And, again, I feel sorry for these new gamers because they missed out. They really did.
For those of you who are wanting to start a campaign, and for those of you who don't know what a campaign is, it's a series of adventures with a stated goal along one story arc. And the idea is to advance your player's characters several levels and attain a goal. It's usually every dungeon master has his own world, no matter what world he's using. He has his own world. And even for dungeon masters that they've been playing a while, but then they've run their world into the ground, they've explored every nook and cranny. This is kind of sort of what it says in a book that I like, and I'm going to talk about it here in a minute. But if the players have explored every nook and cranny, you just want something new, you want to start a new world, here you go. I'm going to give some advice here. First thing, if you're not really sure how to begin, the first thing you want to do is check out the worlds that are already made. The world of Greyhawk, I played in that for years. Forgotten Realms is good. There's a lot of really good ones out there. Find one that you like and start with that. If you want to homebrew it, meaning if you want to make your own world, which I do, because I like the flavor of my homebrewed worlds. I ran a D&D campaign through 2 worlds. It lasted 13 years, and it was, oh my God, wonderful. Great players, had a lot of fun. The first thing, if you're just starting out, the first thing that I suggest that you do is start in a city or a rural area, someplace near a city. Get your little map set up with the denizens in that area. Run your players through a few small scenarios just to get them some gold and a few levels worth of experience, nothing major. This will also let your players develop a sense of camaraderie and teamwork. This will allow you to get to know your players' characters, because you can have the same player running different characters and it's different characters. Okay? So whatever player character the person is running, the player is running, you have to get to know that to fit it into your world. This will allow you to do that. Let them explore some local ruins, retrieve a stolen necklace or some other item. Track down some petty thieves, whatever. Maybe raid the local evil temple. For loot or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just something, anything, nothing major, just to get their feet wet. It builds teamwork. It gets the players used to what the other characters can do, and allows them a sense of camaraderie. In the meantime, while that's going on, while these small scenarios are being run, you should have several weeks to prepare your world for the campaign you wish to run. Make sure there's plenty for each character to do, and that their class and abilities will be useful. A player with nothing to do will lose interest. If your campaign doesn't have anything for the thief to do, he will lose interest. If a guy's running a really great barbarian and it's all, cognitive type of adventure, he's going to lose interest. If you have a knight who is like a cavalier, for example, and he has certain stated goals for that character, and they're not part of the campaign, he's going to lose interest. You have to have the campaign fit the characters, whatever characters they want to run. Make sure the reward is suitable in money and magic items. Now, I do videos on treasure, money haul, magic items, that kind of thing. I do a lot of videos on that. Go check those out. Make sure that the risk justifies the reward. And be kind of stingy with the magic items. I'm not saying, a +1 item, a +1 sword or a +2 dagger or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the big bad items. If it's not necessary for your campaign, you don't have to give it out. It is nice to give them a little perk here and there, a fighter with a +1 sword, or a wizard, maybe with a ring of wizardry that doubles the number of first level spells that he casts, that kind of thing. A wizard with a +1 ring of protection. Help his armor class a little bit. That's nice. But the big bad items you want to restrict as much as possible because they will unbalance your game. Check out my video on magic items. You'll see what I mean. I've done a number of AD&D videos on government types, taxes, tithes, fees, all kinds of economies, treasure, etc. Check those out. Also check out, I did a Star Trek the role-playing game video called NPC Superstar. Watch that one. No NPC, non-player character, that is a character that you run as an ally or as an information source or whatever. No NPC should steal the show and upstage the player characters. The player characters are supposed to be the star of the show. They should only give helpful guidance and maybe help out if it's absolutely necessary. But, limit what your PCs can do. A primary consideration of the design of any campaign is the map. This is one of the important things. Starting point will generally be where the players are, the little area you've already designed. They could also be summoned to a nearby location, alternately, by a noble or some official, a rich guy, the head of a guild, the Thieves Guild or the Merchants Guild or whatever. Regardless, the players will have to go from point A to point B in your game. And the land, geographical features, and denizens between these 2 points must be outlined. They don't have to know about it right away, but you do. Okay? And again, this could be where they have to go to multiple places, which means you have to outline all of it. And you have to have notes of what's where, so that you know what they're going to run into no matter where they go. The end point will be the culmination of the campaign. This is generally where the big bad guy is, along with the goal of the campaign, whatever that goal is. They're retrieving the golden scepter of blah blah, or it's the ring of magical might or whatever the goal is. We're going to overthrow that guy. Well, you got to go get him. For example, the player characters are to travel through a forest to a mountainous region, and then to a seaport. Hang on, I can't read my own writing. To a seaport where they must board a ship and sail to an island to search the ruins of an old castle for magic item X, whatever that is, which is guarded by, of course, a terrible dragon, because in Dungeons and Dragons you got to have dragons, right? The forest could have bandits and other evil occupants to harry the group. The mountains could have bands of orcs and other monsters. The seaport would, of course, have thieves and other antagonists. And of course, don't forget the pirates during the sea voyage. That's important. Got to have pirates. Everything's better with pirates. All along the way, there could be political and military obstacles. The local lord doesn't want him to go through, or he's going to tax him, or he arrests him for blah, that kind of thing. He doesn't like what they're doing, and he's going to try to stop them. Don't forget the helpful villagers as well. These villagers along the way, they're going to feed and house the party, let them, stay here for a silver piece or a copper piece or whatever. And they're going to heal them as well, because a lot of times players need healing. Yeah, that's the downside of combat. You get hurt. Of course, they're going to charge them a suitable fee for the healing, of course. Villagers are also a good place to pick up information and fresh supplies. Now, don't forget to haggle with them, because book price is nice, but haggling is where the money's at. Okay, you have to relieve players of excess coinage, otherwise they'll get rich and they won't want to adventure anymore. That's bluntly put. That's the stated one of the stated things of a dungeon master. Not all encounters will be violent. If they walk in there, they get the snot kicked out of them by some bandits, and they kill the bandits and they escape, or they escape, and they come trotting into the village all beat up and hurt and tired and everything. The village says, "Hey, look at this. We can help them, and they'll pay us." You see, not all encounters are going to be violent. Some of them are just going to be helpful, and a lot of that is good. As for the nuts and bolts of this fictional world, I highly recommend, and this is the book I was telling you about earlier, the AD&D book titled The Wilderness Survival Guide. They have another book called The Dungeoneer's Survival Guide, which deals with the underground. Okay? This is the Wilderness Survival Guide. This is an invaluable guide for wilderness adventures, plus there's a section on world building in the back called Starting from Scratch. Using the basic map you outlined for your starting campaign, you should be able to expand that map to encompass the rest of the world. Keep in mind the size of various cities. City-states are nations made up of a single large city and the farms and villages that surround it. Larger nations have a number of major cities and towns, a multitude of villages of various sizes, and a capital city where the ruler reigns, whatever the ruler's title is. The czar, the raja, the king, the emperor, whoever. And by the way, the difference between an emperor and a king is there are multiple kingdoms in an empire. The emperor rules the kings. All the kings all band together, and they have an emperor over them. That's the difference. That's my understanding. That's much more simplistic, but The Dungeon Master's Guide has sections which outline government types and titles, and a bit of research should flesh out your nations and their politics quite nicely, and I talk about that in the other videos. The more research you do and the more preparation and planning you do, the less improvising you will have to do. Anytime, I talked about this in another video, anytime I design a new campaign, I design a number of antagonists in different directions from the starting point. All of these have different motivations and different master plans, but no matter which way they go, they're going to meet one of them. It allows them adventure no matter what way they go, because sure as the sun rises in the east, your adventure to the north that you've planned out to with precision and it's taken you weeks to plan out, it's all to the north, and of course your players are going to go south for absolutely no reason. They're going to go south. It's just the way it is. It happens in every campaign. Get used to it. Game of maps. One of the more interesting plot devices in Dungeons and Dragons is the map. Players need maps of the area they're in. Dungeon masters need maps of the region and the areas where the players are exploring. The underground cave system, that kind of thing. Whenever some errant NPC buries a treasure, they inevitably make a map to its location, like a pirate's buried treasure map, that kind of thing. And that's what happened years ago. We had a group of player characters come across a map. We divvied up the treasure after an adventure, and the one thing left that wasn't picked from the magical hoard was the map. We didn't know what it led to, but our dungeon master at the time didn't get he didn't put whimsical things into the game. He was very, very serious. And for that reason, we really felt that the map was important. We'd initially thought the map was some kind of a scroll, which is why nobody chose it from the trove. It's in our group. There wasn't a lot of people who could use scrolls, or they weren't. Scrolls weren't high on our list of stuff, so it was the one thing that was left. And then our wizard realized that there was an illusion cast on the scroll case. Once the scroll was removed from the case, we saw it for what it was. And it was a map, and we figured, okay, this could be important. At any rate, we needed to find a way to decipher the instructions on the map. We exhausted our resources and decided to seek help, outside help. That was our issue there. That was our problem. The scribe or sage that we found was, shall we say, less than honest. He took the map while we waited and began to decipher, research the symbology. After 3 days, we discovered he was making copies of the map and changing the symbology on each one. Our dungeon master was a real son of a bitch. Holy crap, he was bad. I loved him. He was a great guy. As far as I know, he runs one of the best games ever. But man, he was mean to us. Oh my God, he was mean. By the time we got the guy with all of the, that was making the maps, we had 8 maps, all with different symbology and different instructions in 8 different languages. And we had no idea which one was which. And at that point, the dungeon master let slip that the map was really important. Yeah, he really was a son of a bitch. It took us months in game time. We were forced to translate and track down each and every one of these maps. We didn't know which one was real, which one was fake. We honestly, we couldn't tell. We were translating and tracking down these maps. The first one led to an orphanage on an island literally across the world. We had to take boats and camels to get there. I mean, it was crazy. The second one led to an elven restaurant which served exquisite steamed carrots. Yeah. The third one led to a pier on the far western coast where a dwarf served as the harbor master. That was it. That was all it led to. And again, you got to translate the map, make sure everything's readable, we understand what it means, figure out the historical connotation, uh, figure out where we're headed, make plans, organize and fund this huge trip to get there to find out there's nothing there. You know, the fourth one led to a library on the northern coast near the ice shelves where we were to find a book that apparently didn't exist. A book that didn't exist. That was the treasure. We looked for weeks on that. It took us months to get there, and then we looked for weeks trying to find it, and then we found out it didn't even exist. The fifth map led to a sunken cargo ship in the lagoon of a tropical island. There was no treasure, but lots of empty scroll cases. Yeah. The sixth one led to a hollow tree in a dead forest containing an ancient bottle, empty, of course, which once held fine elven wine. We spent 6 years tracking down these maps and all the stuff that went with them. 6 years in game time, we did this. And we had 6 dud maps. At that point, a major henchman attacked and stole all 8 of the maps, including the 2 we hadn't done yet. By then, we didn't care anymore. We were fed up. We said, okay, screw it. He can have them. We're going to go over here and do this. And our dungeon master named Larry, he goes, but you have to do the last 2. No, we don't. We're going to go off and do this. We're tired of the maps. We're going this way. I have long said, and this is where I get this, by the way. This particular story is where I get this. I have long said, whenever my players tell me what is it you want us to do? I'm just the dungeon master. I can't tell you what to do. This is where I get that. Because we were so fed up with those stupid fucking maps that we got fed up and we did something else. It was that crazy. And this should save you some work or at least some research. The size or population of population centers is an important aspect. And now all of the following that I'm going to talk about are centers of trade. That's very, very important. Any city is a center of trade. That's in the medieval world, in the old world, cities didn't form out of nothing for nowhere. Out in the middle of nowhere for no reason. There was a reason it was there. It's along a trade route. It was an oasis in the desert. A city formed around it. It was there's mines, something, anything. But that's where cities develop. Villages, towns, and cities. This is what I'm going for. A village is usually between 20 and 500 inhabitants. A village the size of 20 people is very, very rare. A village the size of 500 is very, very rare. A typical village is usually about 250 people. That's typical. Basically 75 households or about 100 buildings, and usually pretty compact. Villages are usually economically challenged, with much of the commerce conducted in trade instead of coinage. So if your players show up at this tiny little village and they start flashing gold around, a lot of the people won't trust it because they may not have ever seen one. Okay. Villages are usually, silver might be better, but gold, that would be pushing it. Copper is usually what they trade in, or, I'll trade you this cow for those 5 sheep or whatever, that kind of thing. Villages are usually self-sufficient, being able to feed and clothe themselves with a good water source and with a few basic industries. They usually have a mill or a smith, and like that. Or there's another village down the road that has what they don't have, and they can trade with them, that kind of thing. Villages are usually governed by a few respected villagers, either advising a recognized chieftain or sitting on a council of some kind. Sometimes the wise woman in the village is the village elder, that kind of thing. Villages may be based loosely on extended family or clan type of a situation. My cousin lives right in that house. My other cousin lives over there, that kind of thing. Duncan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, that kind of thing. So when you're designing a village, these are usually places where characters can maybe find a place to sleep overnight, get some fresh supplies, buy some food, that kind of thing. Or my horse went lame. I need a new one. I'll trade you this one for that one, and this one will heal up. I'll trade you my horse that's lame for it's hurt and it's going to take a while to heal. I'll trade you this horse for that good horse, but I'll also throw in some coins or whatever, that kind of thing. A town is a little bigger. It's usually between 500 and 8,000 inhabitants, and again, 500. A town of 500 is pretty rare. A town of 8,000 is really rare. A typical town was about 4,000 people, generally about a mile square, about 640 acres, and which does not include the local farms and the ranches necessary to provide for the townspeople, because you have the town, which is the center of commerce, and then all the villages and like that around it, the farms and the ranches and stuff that they come in there to trade. And there's villages around towns as well. And this is all contained within that 1 mile area, because everything has to be within walking distance. Everything in a town has to be within walking distance. Usually there's about 20 to 30 structures per acre, and there's 640 acres in a square mile, so you can have a pretty good sized town. Towns are generally founded in areas where natural resources permit. Gold or other mines, lumber mills, farmland, a river crossing, that kind of thing. Towns usually generate most of the income for the inhabitants from the resources in the area: mines, lumber, farms, ranches, etc. Town governments, and by generating revenue from a farm would be granaries, warehouses, some sort of a shipping situation, people, like a Teamsters Guild or something like that. And towns are where you start getting your guilds, by the way. A guild won't go to a village, but they'll go to a village, but they won't set up in a village. They'll set up in towns and things like that where they can make money. Town governments are usually councils or an elected mayor or some other equivalent, burgermeister, that kind of thing. There are stories in the Old West, and I got to reiterate this. There's a story in the Old West of a settler. He's in his wagon. He's driving along. He's part of a wagon train, and as he's crossing the river, his wagon breaks down. So basically, he's like, damn it, and he gets out, and he can't fix his wagon, so he's stuck there. Nobody else can help him, so they go on. This guy sets up shop right there, selling his supplies out of the back of his wagon. Eventually, he builds a shop. And eventually a town builds up around his shop. So at that river crossing, the only one in the area, he has a successful business. And the town built up around it. You know, a trading post became a town, essentially. And that has happened more than once in the Old West. A city is usually considered a very large town, with from 4,000 to 750,000 inhabitants. The largest city in the known world, I think, in the old world, the medieval world, was Ming Peking, and it was around 600,000 people. So, but we're in a fantasy setting, so your town, your big city could be up to 1 million people. I mean, it's up to you how you want to do it. I usually do 750,000. That's a good round number. Capital cities are usually going to be larger than than other major cities. Usually, these cities had about 40 to 50 structures per acre and commanded multiple industries and income sources. The urban area, farms, ranches, etc., to support the city would be huge. Usually about 10 times the number of city inhabitants, because if a city like that, farming and ranching is big industry. It's not just feeding the people. It's got to be big enough to where they can export grain and livestock and like that. Butcher shops are big too because they export meat, and you salt meat, smoked meat and like that is a commodity. Especially if you're on a coastal area where the people have to go out on the ocean in big ships. If you're on the coast, fishing is a big industry as well. I'm just saying, this is stuff to consider. Get the old creative juices flowing, as it were. A city-state is an independent nation of one large city with several villages around it, including ranches, farms, and industry. It is a nation. That one city is a nation unto itself. A nation or country is composed of one or more cities, multiple towns, and many villages organized into a country. Obviously, the smaller villages trade with the towns trade with the big cities. Okay, and the ruler is in whatever his title, Raja, King, Emperor, whatever, is in the main capital. The ruler. And these, by the way, the inhabitants of this are generally united by common descent, history, culture, or language. Or it could be they were conquered. You don't know. I mean, it's up to you. You make the world how you want it. You're the dungeon master, And the ruler, the king, Raja, whatever, rules from the capital city, and his representatives rule the other cities. Most times in a feudal society, there's elections are not held. They may at the very small local level, but as far as who runs that town, well, I'm going to send my cousin, the duke. I'm going to let him run that town over there, that kind of thing. And the bigger the city, the more important the royal that runs it. It's this whole system, any kind of a big nation like that, is well organized with shared laws and customs. An empire, for those of you who don't know, an empire is composed of multiple nations or countries and is ruled by an emperor or an empress. So essentially 3 or 4 kingdoms, they unite under the banner of one emperor. That's the difference between an empire and a kingdom. A kingdom is, I'm the king, I rule these cities. I rule this nation. An empire is composed of multiple nations. When you get into the nations and countries and empires, you get into national currency. Here's something else that needs to be talked about. The gold coins you got from the ancient ruins in country A may not be legal tender in country B. Money changers generally charge, in my world, 2%. I think they do something like that in the Dungeon Master's Guide as well. But they generally charge 2% to take those worthless gold coins there and replace them with these legal gold coins here. Yeah, worthless gold coins. And of course, he's going to melt them down and turn them into his own coinage. So, some nations, or he'll melt them down and turn them into gold ingots so that he can barter with them, that kind of thing. Some nations or countries have banks which will hold coinage and other valuables for citizens. Here's the kicker. You have to be a citizen. That's generally the rule with banks. Now, if you pay enough, they'll overlook that, but I'm just saying. And this service is usually costly, between 2 and 10% or more. Interest rates do not apply. So essentially, you're paying them to store your money, your gold that is very heavy and you can't carry around. I came out with a wagon load of gold, but I can't carry it. Well, guess what? Oh, look, you're a friend of the bank. And that's basically how banks started. They were warehouses where people would store money, and the people who stored it for them would take a cut. That's essentially how it works. And then you do not earn interest in these banks. That's an advanced banking system that doesn't exist yet. And remember, the main rule, ultimately, this is your world. How you organize it and map it out is completely up to you. The more preparations you make regarding the areas your player characters can possibly travel into, the less improvisation and ad-libbing you will need to do. I cannot stress enough that your player characters will invariably go the opposite way from whatever adventure you've designed. This is nothing new. Players have been doing that forever, and they may not even intend to do it. But if they find out they have done it, they'll be ecstatic. They'll laugh in your face. I've had players laugh in my face. Well, we're traveling, and I designed the adventure over there. Well, you know, that kind of thing. The trick is always to seem prepared, especially when you aren't. That's the trick. Okay. Particular one is on governments. Check out my video, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Stories In-Game Politics. Okay, that's going to tell you a lot of good information as well. This particular one is on the different specific governments. Now, the governmental system of any land can grant some really great opportunities for adventure. So as a dungeon master, you have to put a lot of thought into what kind of government the area is under for your that you're running your adventure in. Your player characters can find all kinds of things to do working for or against the local government. If it's a good, just government and they're offering bounties for good things, you have them work for them. Hell yeah, no problem there. By the same token, on the flip side, if it's an oppressive regime that's, a police state for whatever reason, they're the evil king is taxing everybody to death and blah 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 blah. Yeah, you can also work to overthrow that. So, whichever way you want to do it is fine. There's lots of different things you can do. On page 89 of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons DM's Guide, there is a wonderful list of different governmental forms, and this is a very abbreviated list. It gives the name and a short description. Any of them could be ideal for a medieval fantasy. Usually, when we think of a medieval fantasy, it's more of a feudal system, meaning it's like a big pyramid. The king controls a few guys here who control a bunch of guys under them, who control a bunch of guys under them, blah, blah, blah. It's like a big pyramid scheme. But before you decide which system you want to use, I recommend a lot of research into which one you want to do, because they all have pluses and minuses, pros and cons. One thing you have to understand is in any medieval setting, corruption is prevalent. It is very, very prevalent in most of them. The only one I can think of, the minimal amount of corruption would be in a militocracy. And what that means is the military runs the government. Okay. Now, when you have a bureaucracy running a government that has a strong military, you can have a military hierarchy with lots of corruption in it. But when you have the military actually running the government, there's a lot less corruption per se. And the reason being is the military itself has checks and balances. For example, the logistics lines, the different costs, the expenditures, they all have to add up. If they don't, somebody has to answer for that. Military is very, very efficient at that. When you have a bureaucracy running the government, that's where your gray area comes in, and your upper echelon military, maybe their pencils aren't quite so sharp, and that's where you get the corruption there. And that happens at a lot of militaries around our modern world, because the bureaucracies running the government, and there's a lot of gray area where people can be corrupt. If it's a pure militocracy, those gray areas go away. You can still have corruption, but it's not going to be near as much as a bureaucracy running the military. You see what I'm saying? There's a difference there. But one thing you have to understand as far as a medieval setting, you have to remember the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. It's that simple, okay? Most regimes in fantasy settings maintain what's called a balance of force. There's a lot of campaigns out there where a player can buy just about anything. And I'm usually pretty lax about that unless I have a major campaign underway. In which case, then I take this into account. But for the most part, this isn't going to be a factor. But if you want to maintain the realism of a medieval regime, you have to take this into account, the balance of force. Civilians who cannot have weapons or training are no threat to the regime. So the way you keep peasants from uprising is you don't let them have weapons, and you don't let them learn how to use them. Okay? Untrained peasants are easy to beat by a trained army, even if there are a lot more peasants. In Okinawa and in several other places in the world, the peasants weren't allowed to have weapons. So they adapted martial arts, unarmed fighting techniques. Te, meaning hand, was then later modified into karate, empty hand. And then, of course, they modified that into using farm implements as weapons. For those of you who like the 70s Bruce Lee movies and all that, I love them. They're great. Bruce Lee's one of the greatest. He liked the nunchucks. That's a wheat thresher, okay? It's also considered a pretty damn good flail. They adapted farm implements because they weren't allowed to have weapons. You see what I'm saying? But untrained and unarmed civilians cannot be pressed into service. When you have the mass of people that are not trained in weapons, suddenly an invading army, you need all the people you can get, right? Well, these untrained peasants, civilians, you can't press them into service as soldiers. You can't use them to defend effectively. Now, most regimes train the most loyal people and keep weapons locked up, so that way, in case they need it, they can hand out these weapons and blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. But as far as the untrained people, the most they can be used is shock troops. Send them in a mad charge into the enemy, put them in the front ranks so that your good soldiers are behind them and can take advantage of whatever. But for the most part, most medieval regimes didn't train their peasants to use weapons. If they ever did get training, then, they were watched closely. Most feudal systems, called a feudality, are organized into a series of pyramid-shaped structures, and I mentioned this earlier. The ruler, the king, controls a number of dukes or duchesses, because, who in turn, the dukes and duchesses control a number of counts. So you have the king, 4 or 5 dukes, including one of them being the archduke, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then below him, each duke controls a number of counts, and below that, each count controls a number of barons. So it's like a big pyramid. Okay. Each baron controls an area. Each count controls a number of baronies. Each duke controls a number of counties. The most powerful duke is considered the archduke, and he controls the largest territory, which is usually around the capital, because he's usually one of the advisors to the king. And these you didn't have to arrange it that way, but that's generally how it is. You don't have to arrange it that way. You can arrange it any way you want. If you're the dungeon master, you can set it up anyone. You can even change the names. You don't have to call them dukes and counts and whatever. Okay. The opportunities for corruption are massive within this group, as the peasantry and merchants have basically little recourse. If they're taxed heavily, they're not going to report all their earnings. If the tax collector comes by and says, "So how much money did you make last year?" or last week or last month or whatever. If you tell him the full amount, you have to pay the full amount of taxes. So generally, they're not going to tell him the full amount. So he has to estimate. Okay, and if you're caught cheating, then the fines are a lot stiffer. Usually some jail time and blah 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 blah. But what it boils down to is this is a reason for peasants to revolt if the taxes are high. Very oppressive government, lack of freedoms, that kind of thing. Rebellions without high-ranking benefactors are usually just peasants and merchants with whatever tools of their various trades. A blacksmith can have a hammer. A farmer has a pitchfork. That kind of thing. Mauls, axes, pitchforks, etc. And if they can't come up with something like that, they'll take a pole, sharpen it, a sharp stick. Armies are raised by enlisting these people to bolster the existing core standing armies. So when you have a bunch of these unarmed peasants or, merchants or farmers or whatever, damn bug, try getting sunglasses. When you have a military need for a large army, they'll go out and they'll say, okay, all you guys grab your stuff and come on. And they'll go. You guys get to stand in the front ranks. Well, why would they want to do that? Because they're told to. Because the Lord demanded it, which is another reason for a rebellion. Basically, here's your balance of force factor. The Lord wants to keep the peasants from revolting, from rebelling. So he keeps them unarmed and untrained. He also taxes them mercilessly. Mercilessly might be a bit of a strong word, but he taxes them heavily enough so that they can't hire mercenaries. By the same token, he sometimes may need them to help bolster his army. You see? So he's got to have some of them trained. He's got to have some of them at least able to use a weapon. So you see what I mean? There's a balance of force there. You have to balance out that. At least that's the way it was done historically. Now, that being said, this is just advice, and you can run your game any way you want. The whole point is for your players to have fun. So, if you can work out some sort of a rebellion situation where they're going to overthrow the government, or where they're going to work for the government, or whatever, you have to know what kind of government it is. That's what that boils down to. And when you run a government based in a medieval setting, you have to know how the governments were run. World the Dungeon Master creates. If you're running a game and you haven't run a lot, one thing you're going to have to worry about is in-game politics. And I'm not talking about between the players. I'm talking about the world that you're in. Whatever world you're in, the players eventually are going to have to go to town to sell stuff or buy stuff. Any town that you go to has a hierarchy of government, for lack of a better word, and where there's government, there's politics. Period. You cannot get away from it. Now, you can limit the amount as much as possible, and that's generally a good idea. I'm a politically oriented person. Check out some of my other videos on my channel, but I try not to put too much of it into the game as far as that goes. However, there are some cases where you don't really have a choice. The Dungeon Master's Guide the book, The Dungeon Master's Guide, is a wonderful, wonderful resource. It has a great list of different government types and how they function. It's got the different government types, the different titles for the different governmental functionaries, all the way from the king or Raja or queen or whatever, on down through the barons and the baronets and the governors, viscounts, whatever. Those are the different titles, by the way. It's got how to run taxes, tithes, and tolls. A tax is a general tax on everything. A tithe is what you generally pay a church. A cleric has to tithe so much to a church, as does a paladin, and if anybody who's religious will tithe to their church. in modern parlance, they're passing a collection plate and you throw a penny in or whatever, or throw some coins in or whatever. Tolls are the other thing. When you're entering a town, if it's a walled city, most guards at the city charge a gate fee to get in. You have to pay to get into the city to conduct business. And this is a toll levied on merchants to come in. And they generally levy it on everybody. You can, depending on the size of the city and how much they need money for whatever reason, because you don't know what the politics are or what they're doing, what the city's involved in. If they're involved in a war, taxes generally go up. Tolls as well. But if it's peacetime and there's not really a hell of a lot going on, it's usually pretty cheap, maybe a silver piece a head at most. Now, in some places where the ruler, whoever he is, a king, queen, baron, Raja, whatever, they may up that ante maybe a silver piece per foot. So 2 silver pieces for a person with 2 feet. And if he's got a horse, he has to add another 4 because the horse has 4 feet. So, a man and a horse, that's 2 for a silver piece per head. If it's charging per foot, that jumps up to 6. So, you see what I'm saying? It's a way for a city to raise funding. It's also a way for a game master to relieve players of coinage. Keeping them broke makes them want to adventure more. Gives them, you don't want to rob them blind, but sometimes you can with a thieves guild. But my point is, tolls aren't the way to do it. And there's also toll roads. It's a toll used generally to maintain a road. They have to pay for the guards. They have to pay for the maintenance of the road, keep it nice and even, get rid of fallen rocks and branches and stuff so wagons can go through. There's a plethora of different things you can do as far as that goes. The Dungeon Master's Guide also basically tells you how to deal with religions. Different religions are practiced in different ways, and they have another book. It's called Legends and Lore. It deals specifically with religions in the game, because if you're a cleric, you have to worship a god. And some other players, like paladins, have to worship a god, but other players sometimes want to as well. My point is, this book, Legends and Lore, which, by the way, used to be called Deities and Demigods. It's the same book, it's just different. They had some sort of a contractual problem with the name. I'm not real sure what it was. It was originally Deities and Demigods. They changed it to Legends and Lore. So, it's the same book. I have both of them in there. My point is, that book details different religions, gods, what the gods can do, how their worshippers act, that kind of thing. Functionaries. Most functionaries that the players will run into will be the city guard, tax collectors, the stableman. A guy watching the stables for the guy. Well, he shoots so many horses, so now I can tax him this much. That kind of thing. Different occupations in the city. Like I said, the stableman, the smithy, the bartender, the town crier who goes makes announcements because that's their news source. Hear ye, so and so had a baby today. Praise him. Our king has declared war on this other city, so we have to, all able-bodied men are to report to the armory and learn, blah 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 blah, that kind of thing. A town crier. They had a really good example of this it had 2 seasons. I want to say it was on HBO called Rome. I've got the series over there. It's quite good. But they have a really good example of a town crier there. So, at any rate, the Dungeon Master's Guide is a very good resource for all of this stuff. They show you how to hire, how and what kind of mercenaries you can hire, how much they cost, and blah, 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 blah. A whole lot of different functions of people in town. Clerics, not as in a cleric that can cast spells, but a cleric who does clerical work, an accountant or whatever, all kinds of different things like that. In certain classes, by definition, certain character classes, by definition, are politically oriented. For example, a cavalier. A cavalier is a knight. He's usually serving a lord of some kind, a king, a baron, a count, whatever, whoever he's sworn allegiance to. And his family are all knights because it's a caste, C-A-S-T-E, caste system. Paladins and clerics serve an organized religion. Organized religions have temples, and temples are in cities, and they have politics in those. You have the politics in the temple, and you have the politics where the temple deals with the town. Thieves and assassins may join guilds. There are politics in these guilds. A hierarchy of command. On top of that, most of these thieves guilds, in order to operate, either work under the radar to avoid the city politicians and the city guard and like that, or they're shelling out some money to a local functionary so they somehow never get found out. They might arrest a few thieves here and there, pickpockets, that kind of thing, just to make themselves look good. But they won't ever attack, they won't ever go after the guild itself. You see what I'm saying? And thieves guilds, if you're not familiar with those, thieves and assassins guilds are wonderful because an assassin's guild gives out jobs. They take money and they assign assassins to go and kill people that other people pay to have killed. That's what an assassin does. Thieves guild, a thief who is part of a guild can get information on jobs. He can get, if he does steal something, oh my God, how am I going to get rid of this big gaudy thing that everybody just knows of? He goes to the guild can fence it. He might not get full price, but he'll get some money out of it. If you steal something, that's normal. Gold, a ring here and there, nothing major. That's one thing. But if you break into somebody's house and steal something that's, everybody knows he's got it. Everybody knows whose it is. It's worth a buttload of money, but it's really well known in the town. He can go to the Thieves Guild. The Thieves Guild will pay him X amount for it. It may not be what it's worth, but, it's enough so that the guild can make a little bit of profit. And this guy doesn't walk away with something that he can't get rid of. You see what I'm saying? The guild can then smuggle it out of town and take it to this other city over here where maybe it's not so well known, and they can get a better price for it, make a little money. And then God knows what happens to it after that. But my point is, the Thieves Guild can be useful for a thief. He doesn't have to join the guild, but it has functions. See, there's good and bad parts. The bad part about joining a Thieves Guild is you have to do what they say, and you have to pay dues to this guild. X amount of your X percentage of your profit, or it may just be a set amount, 10 gold a month, which is okay, because if you steal 1,000, you get to keep 990. You see what I'm saying? It works out that way. But the problem with that is, in order to be part of the guild, you have to stay in the city. Now, a guild may order you to go and do something outside the city, and that's fine. But anytime you're dealing with the Thieves Guild, there's politics. Wizards require libraries, and libraries, they require libraries for research. Libraries capable of mystical research are expensive, and they are hard to maintain. So generally, they are usually found inside a city. Very rarely you're going to find a library out in the middle of nowhere that's well maintained that you can do magical research on. You see what I'm saying? So the city charges money. The library charges money because they've got to pay taxes to the city in order to function. Well, politics. There are politics in the game. You cannot avoid it. You can control the amount of politics, but and try to keep it as simple as possible. Take my word for it. But you're going to have politics in there. If nothing else, if you don't pay your taxes, the city guard will come and thump you and throw you in jail. Politics. It's just the way it is. City adventures are a great way to add some diversity to the game, because it's not the same old dungeon crawl. Encounters can be very, very diverse. I talked about the Thieves Guild. Thieves are great for stealing players' money. If somebody rips you off and you see them, you holy crap, that guy stole my money, and you chase after him, and then you follow him into this warehouse, and he goes through a trap door. Gee, you've entered the Thieves Guild, where there's a bunch of thieves down there who don't want you to get your money back, and they'll kill you. You see what I'm saying? It's a diverse thing. Then there's always adventure in a city. The city guards, if you get caught doing something, the city guards don't like you or whatever, they'll chase you down and thump you and throw you in jail. So there's always taverns. I did a video called The Pub Crawl. Go check that out. There's always in pubs you can find bartenders who know of certain jobs that need to be done and knows the people who are willing to pay to have those jobs done. Nice way to get a job. Again, the more government officials, and you can find all kinds of different contacts in a city. You can, if you make friends with an armorer, you have a place to go to, and he'll cut you a decent deal on fixing your armor if it gets messed up. If you make friends at a smithy or a weapon shop, he may cut you a good price on, they're still going to rob you blind, but it won't be as bad on a sword or an axe or whatever. So anytime you go into a city, it creates different opportunities for adventure, but at the same time, you also have to take into account the denizens of that city, the people who live there, are beholden to the government of that city to keep them safe from marauders and stuff. It's the whole point of having a city. Well, those people have to have money to make everything run. So you have taxes. Those people have to have an army. Taxes. Those people have to pay the city guards to keep everybody safe. Taxes. Gee, it's kind of like the modern world. Government ain't got no money. All it's got is your money. Taxes. It's the way that works. So if you're going to run a game, make sure and you get your politics right. And again, you don't have to go in depth. It doesn't have to be a huge political thing, but keep it in mind because there has to be a logical progression. This guy wants to do this, therefore he does that. Politics makes all that happen and can get in the way too.